Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruje, and Idahosa Osamans.
The deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby.
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring Nigerian broadcasting.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's another beautiful day, the first day of the month of February. You know, like we always say here, Happy New Month. It's another opportunity for us to look at issues related to business, finance, global issue, and the economy. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As you know, the Early Exchange is all about shaping policy and advancing development with our conversation. Today, we're going to give you the best of programming. We'll be looking at economic outlook for the year 2024. As IMF upgrades its forecast for the year. We're also going to beam our searchlight on the aviation industry to tell you what is happening in that industry and how that is going to impact you. And that's why you just have to be part of this conversation. All you just have to do is to go on our social media platform, on our YouTube page to share your view, to hear your opinion. Let your voice be heard. Blessing is there. She's ready to also pilot you this morning. How are you today?
I'm very well. Good morning and welcome to February.
Yes, Happy New Month.
I wish you say.
Man, the year is just
it's flying. It's flying,
you know,
and we need to fly with it.
That's it.
And talking about flying, let's fly now to the new studio to bring you the latest in the world.
Hello and welcome to News Update on Souq News. I'm Adesoa Iromoseli. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has issued a new circular to address concerns about Nigerian banks engaging in excessive foreign currency speculations and hoarding, while expressing concerns on some banks holding on to large amounts of foreign currency for a long time, hoping to profit from currency fluctuations. The bank has introduced guidelines mandating these banks to ensure that their net open position NOP should not exceed certain limits effective February 1, 2024. The Apex Bank also directed them to follow specific templates for calculating daily and monthly positions, as well as mandating them to maintain sufficient high-quality liquid foreign assets to cover obligations and practice natural hedging to avoid currency risk. Non-compliance may lead to sanctions and suspension from the foreign exchange market, reflecting the CBN's commitment to curbing speculative activities and promoting financial stability. Moving on, FBN Holdings has appointed Femi Otedola, a prominent businessman and investor, as its new chairman. The parent company of First Bank of Nigeria disclosed this in a corporate filing on the Nigerian Exchange Limited (NGX). Otedola, who became the firm's largest shareholder in December 2021 with a 7.57% stake, was chosen after a board meeting on 31st of January 2024. The financial institution lauded Otedola's entrepreneurial vision and past successes, highlighting his transformative leadership at Fort Oil PLC. His diverse investment portfolio and recent acquisition of shares in Dangote Cement have further solidified his standing as one of Africa's wealthiest individuals. Otedola's wealth was recently valued at $1.1 billion by Forbes, ranking him as the fourth richest Nigerian. The Nigerian naira showed a slight recovery against the dollar in the official market yesterday, bouncing back from a record low of 1,482.57 naira per dollar the previous day. According to data from the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, NAFEM, The domestic currency appreciated by 1.85%, closing at 1,455.59 naira per dollar. This represented a gain of 26.98 naira, or a 1.85% increase compared to the previous day's close. The intraday high and low were recorded at 134.07 naira to a dollar and 789 naira to a dollar, respectively, reflecting a wide spread of 720 naira to a dollar. Foreign turnover at the close of trading reached $134.07 million, marking an 85.36% increase from the previous day. Despite this official market improvement, the naira weakened in the parallel forex market, closing at 1,470 naira to a dollar, a 1.02% drop from the previous day. Away from that, South Africa's Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor says Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have officially confirmed their participation in the BRICS bloc after receiving invitations last year. These invitations were extended with one to Argentina during a summit in Johannesburg in August. The move, now affirmed by 5 of the 6 invited nations, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Ethiopia, Iran, and Egypt, is aimed at reshuffling what they perceive as an outdated global order. However, Argentina has chosen not to act on the successful application made by the previous administration to become full members of BRICS, a decision that South Africa accepts. And finally, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has issued an apology during a U.S. Senate hearing on the impact of social media on children, responding to families who presented pictures of children allegedly harmed by such platforms. Prompted by Senator Josh Hawley, Zuckerberg stood up and expressed remorse for the hardship faced by these families. The hearing featured a video of children sharing experiences of being bullied on social media, and senators recounted instances of youth suicides linked to extortion after sharing photos with predators. The senator criticized Zuckerberg, asserting that the social media products are killing people. Zuckerberg acknowledged the concerns and pledged continued effort to address industry-wide challenges and prevent further recurrence of such. And with that, we'll wrap it up on the news update for the hour. I'm Adesowa Iramasele. Many thanks for watching.
All right, thank you, Adesua, for adding value to Early Exchange. With your news update, you actually took us around the world. Now we want to start our conversation from the global scene, where the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has upgraded its forecast for the year 2024, talking about economic outlook for the year 2024. The forecast was upgraded by 0.2 points, increasing it to 3.1%, talking about global economic outlook. What does this imply for the whole world when it comes to the issue of economic growth and development? And the question also is, what do we need to do to ensure that this effect of this forecast will come to pass? We have an in-house analyst here. We're being joined by Dr. Idahosa Osamanze, who is here to complement today's programming. Glad to have you join us as usual.
Femi, always a pleasure to be sandwiched by this very cerebral mind.
I love your choice of words. That's interesting.
It's a nice one to hear in the month of February. And I'm blushing to it.
I'm honored to be with you.
All right. So we're on the global scene today.
Yeah.
So let's start the conversation looking at the forecast made by IMF yesterday, upgrading the economic outlook by 0.2%, 0.2 points, upgrading to 3.1%. What do you think necessitated this kind of change, or the change in the forecast, quite different from what you predicted last year?
Well, I think what the IMF has done is to look at the fundamentals in global economy and see what is changing in terms of central banks revisiting the monetary policies of each country. Take, for example, you know, China has come out of its zero COVID policy. Now, of course, the economy in China is rebounding. US is also trying to see how to increase the interest rate now that the shock that has been occasioned by the glut in the supply chain since the COVID and the Russia-Ukraine crisis has created globally. Now, you see, central bank is trying to control money because you are easing off from the supply side, and now you are getting pressure from the demand side because there's so much money here, and then we create disinflation. So this situation is what the IMF is analyzing to give us this new outlook for 2024.
The IMF has hinged this upgrade of the global economic outlook on stronger than expected growth in the US and increased fiscal support in China. Do you consider this to be realistic?
Well, I won't say it's realistic, because the whole world was sitting down waiting, and all of a sudden COVID swamped on us, and nobody predicted it was going to come. And that created a whole lot of distortion in the supply chain. And then, of course, pushing prices up, and then, of course, countries trying to manage these prices, and then we're working their monetary policy downward to reduce rates so that people can have access to funds. Governments were printing money globally to ensure that people are able to have their livelihood. All these things were responsible for the growth for 2023, from 2020 really to 2023. So this was not predicted. It was not expected. While the world was thinking of recovering from the pandemic, all of a sudden we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And of course, that distorted the growth in the whole of Europe because of their reliance on gas supply from Russia to Europe. So all these things were unintended. Now we're talking about the challenge in Israel, Gaza. So all these issues or geopolitics of the world have a way of influencing the economic outlook. So we can say, as we say today, if everything, like they say in economics, remains equal, but we know that nothing is equal. And that is what it is. We live in a world that management expert called today that is VUCA, a very volatile world. The rate of which thing changes is meteoric, like the rate, even the speed of light is low considering the rate of changes today in the world. Now you also look at uncertainties that we really cannot say this is what it's going to be. So I also think that while we are optimistic of seeing these changes happen, we also will need to tread with caution so that what leaders must not see this as something that is cast in stone. It's just a projection that things might look better if everything remains equal. But like I said, in reality, nothing is equal.
All right. According to IMF, this change in the forecast is necessitated by, the resilience being exhibited by the U.S. economy and the Chinese economy. Now, if you look at the largest economies in the world, U.S. and China, they are taking the front seat. How much of a role does these two countries play when it comes to the issue of economic growth or outlook for the year, and how sensitive as regards anything that happens in these two countries to the global economic outlook?
If I were to take a position, I would not even take the view of IMF very serious, especially when it comes to the US and the Chinese economy.
Why?
Yeah, the reason is they are very simple. As we speak, the debt crisis in the US is tragic. It's tragic. And even those who are economic experts within the US are projecting that bubble is about to burst in the US. So I don't see any resilience that is putting debt per GDP today in the US is about 102,106 US dollar per each citizen in the US, and multiply that about 300 million people, over 300 million people in the US. So that is the situation in the US as we speak. And that's why you find that even in terms of rating of the politics in the US, people are thinking that the Democrats are mismanaging the economy of the US. So I don't see where those resilience are coming from. Yeah, of course, we are seeing the easing from the supply side, which the glut is about to be over. But we cannot say for certainty that those monetary policies that is being embarked by the US is going to really take away these negatives, as far as I'm concerned. Now, when you go to China, on the other hand, we're also having a China whose economy is also being stifled. Recently, even the Central Bank of China is reviewing its own lending and loan policies, because you're seeing glut in China, because the deflationary trend in China is a big problem, coupled with their aging population. And you see, once economy is, the real estate business is being affected, you know the economy is getting bad. And can see what's happening in the Chinese real estate businesses that is suffering a glut. And this should point you to where the Chinese government seems to be heading for in 2024. So for me, I don't see it to be too optimistic that there's a resilience in these two economies. And I don't see that to be the measure. But for me, what will drive it is really, like I said, the OECD countries. And you're seeing in Europe, there is some level of stability coming into Europe, and that can happen. And some, of course, Asia countries who are also standing to drive the economy, yes, those could really push the global growth for 2024. I also don't see Africa taking the backstage, because for me, the growth prospect is more in Africa than we can see in Europe.
All right, the IMF, however, warned that there are still a number of risks to the outlook. One of them is the ongoing Ukraine war and rising interest rates. But let's look at the ongoing Ukraine war. How is this expected to impact the global outlook for 2024? Is it supposed to be any different than it has impacted already over the last 2 years?
Yeah, you see, the risk here is, you see, what affects one affects all. If this challenge in Russia and Ukraine persists, the struggle for supremacy between NATO and Russia continue, what you're going to find is that you are expecting more sanctions from NATO against Russia. And you're also seeing a lot of collaborations that is going to come between the friends of Russia and strengthening those ties. So this is going to happen in 2024, definitely, because if Russia is trying to be gagged by NATO, Russia friends must be finding a way to lend hands to support them so that they don't go down. We can't say Russia is not leprous as it is, that the whole world is running away from them. But we know that countries like China, countries like India, North Korea, and so many countries in Africa actually gravitating toward Russia. So this is because of the economic benefit that come to them. That's why I keep saying here that we have since left the era of multilateralism, and we are in a bipolar world as we speak, because it's actually the war again between West and East. That's where we have found ourselves following this sanction that is coming from NATO toward Russia. So this is the challenge that the world is going to face, and it's going to be very risky. Now you imagine a full-scale war against Russia, what that will mean. If the Nord 2, Nord 3, and Nord 1 is blocked, which means, of course, gas supply can go into the whole of Europe, and that is going to pull down the entire European economy. So that is a huge risk that faces the entire of Europe. And you are seeing that many of African or sub-Saharan African countries relying so much on the wheat coming from both Ukraine and Russia. This is not going to come, and therefore the price of bread that is already currently at 1,000 in as we speak here can get up to 2,000 or 5,000. So these are issues that are going to affect global economy. So as it is happening in Russia and Ukraine, their impact on our economy is also very, very significant.
Talking about issues that will have impact on the economy, let me read to you what IMF is saying about the crisis in the Middle East. It says there are new risks to commodities and supply chains from the Middle East volatility, but inflation globally has fallen faster than expected. Now let's look at the issue, the crisis at the Middle East, the disruption in the global supply chain. How will this impact on the outlook for the year?
We said it here about 2 or 3 days ago, where we're looking at the crisis, the Yemen crisis on the Red Sea. Now, the challenge of the vessels coming either from China or from the West through the Red Sea, Suez Canal, is a big problem. So it will definitely affect both the supply side and the demand side. Now, because the people bringing the goods cannot transport, because if the vessels are not willing to go through the Red Sea to bring goods to Africa, then of course those who are selling will get money, those who want to buy will not sell. So you have a disinflation. So this is a problem. So it's obvious and clear that if there's a crisis at that Suez Canal, no vessel can come in here. And like I said about 2 days ago, the approach of the West to this issue of the Houthi rebel cannot be resolved by gun and bullets. It has to be addressed via negotiation. And I think this is where the world needs to really sit down and reassess its own approach to global diplomacy. That is not just about ignoring the strength and think that these people are just weak, that you just can come into them and shut them down one day. It's not happening. Because the network of terrorism as we speak today is now worldwide. And I think world power should know that it's not just about Iran now. We're seeing them spread across the whole of Asia. We are seeing them filter into Africa. Now they are also in Europe. And so those voices of discontent will continue. So if you are going to resolve this issue, we must get into the part of negotiation. Because any crisis anywhere in the world, you see, when globalization came and we're talking about one village, one global village, what that really means is that the world is so interconnected that a trouble in one part of the world will become a shock to every other region of the world.
All right, now let's look at the implications of the revised global outlook for businesses. What does this say to businesses that may want to make investment in certain regions?
Well, I think for business people, there's a huge potentials that's also being predicted here. And if you even look at our own foreign exchange, the exchange market, you see for a huge run for the whole of January, where people were expecting that trade really will have been moderate, the growth was somewhat very fundamental in the last 1 month. And this is also being replicated all across the world. It's also saying that, yes, investors are beginning to say, oh, things are getting normal. That is what it means. We are seeing this easing here. We are seeing these problems sorted here. Now people are ready now to say, okay, well, let's commit our money to do more business. And I think that's what it's potent for businesses to see that there is peace going on. We are now overcoming the challenge of the supply chain, Countries are looking at their monetary policies. Fiscal policies are being addressed. Of course, all the approaches the world is taking is to see how to see global growth, how to subsidize countries, because we're talking about creating more employment. So much money is being put out there. This monetary framework of nations and the fiscal framework of nations is what the businesses are also looking at. That is government going to tighten more of the bet? And I am seeing really, for example, in the US, where the next election may be just quite fundamental, where businesses in the US are looking forward for a tax relief. And if this is going to happen, that will be in change of leadership, definitely. Because you know, the US politics, if you have the Democrats in government, the business suffer. If you have the Republican, then the business are relieved. So this is the nature of their own politics. So this is why you see there's always a switch after every 8 years between the Democrats and the Republicans, because the Republicans take money from the big businesses to do some Yoruba people call Sarah for the poor people. And then, so you do so much Sarah because they are taxing so much business money to support the poor and do your social services. Now, that takes a toll on businesses. It's a disincentive on business. But when Republican comes and say, look, the business has suffered, so let's give them some holiday so that they can survive. So if businesses are not breathing, really the poor people cannot breathe. So these are things that you can also see happening in 2024, because that significant change in the outcome of the US election will, to a very large extent, also affect this projection.
Now, let's see what IMF is saying about Africa. Make reference to the largest two economies in Africa, talking about Nigeria and South Africa, and perhaps Egypt is also following. But hear what IMF has said. As much as IMF has to upgrade the economic outlook globally, but for Africa, it was downgraded, saying that the forecast growth in Nigeria and South Africa region will have a downgrade outturn for the year 2024. Earlier you shared your optimism about Africa, but here you have IMF saying otherwise. How do you feel?
Well, the Bretton Woods view of Africa is always like this, especially when Africa is trying to take the right step in right direction. The world is always very skeptical about Africa. I don't share this optimism of the IMF about Africa, because you also seen very deliberate effort by African leaders to grow their economy. Take, for example, the Nigerian we are talking about. We cannot use the exchange rate today to project what Nigeria is going to look like in the rest of 2024. A whole lot is happening in the monetary policy in Nigeria on a daily basis. CBN is putting out a lot of circulars every day in Nigeria to see how to address those particular issues. Don't also forget that there's a whole lot of things that's actually putting pressure on our foreign exchange, and one of that is energy. And we are working hard to see how to address that issue. And if, by projection, the Port Harcourt refinery gets on stream, for example, if the gas project that Nigeria is doing, that's going to take gas from Nigeria to Spain, is anything to go by, these are all going to bring in a lot of foreign exchange into our economy. So we are going to be much more robust than the projection for me. And it is not just only here. We're also seeing the increases, especially, yes, we may not have to embrace the coup in the Sahel. But there's also a growth going on in the Sahel. You can imagine that the fastest growing economy in the Sahel today is Niger, just from the uranium. So where are we going to put this in all these projections from the IMF? So we cannot look at it and say, oh, Africa is just going. No, we can't use one single indicator of the fiscal issues to determine how Africa is going to grow. Africa is doing a lot. There's a whole lot going on in Ethiopia. There's a whole lot going on in Morocco. There's a whole lot going on in Rwanda. All these things come together. For me, I still feel that Africa will drive the growth, global growth, for the economic outlook for 2024. My personal view.
Okay. From what you just said, you do not so much agree with some of the outlook, global outlook for 2024 as presented by the IMF. And for Africa specifically, that looks up to international financial institutions for projections like this. Should Africa have its own body that makes projections that it relies on?
Yeah, I think to a very large extent, the African Development Bank is also becoming very credible in terms of projections. And I think most African leaders really need to rely more on ADB than we do with IMF. Although we still see some of the overtones of the IMF over what ADB is doing. But it is to see the effort that ADB is also putting in place for 2024 to see growth across Africa. So we cannot also undermine the effort of the regional bank in terms of pushing money in there and see Africa grow. That's the point I'm making. So if we are going to use the exchange rate to project what is going to happen in Nigeria, it may not completely answer the entire question. Yes, we're talking about exchange rate crisis that seems to be undermining the effort of government, but we're also seeing growth on the other side. The Nigerian security exchange market has gained up to 104 basic points just about 3 days ago. Now, as at yesterday, it was 101%. Now, if the Nigerian stock market is growing at that rate, with capitalization of over 52 trillion as we speak, these are monies that are going to produce or multiply in the days and the years to come. So we are seeing basic companies that are making real good impact. Just this morning I read, Gereku Power Project announced a profit of over 110% over last year. So these are for me signs that there are a whole lot happening within the economy. Yes, we are crying about what's happening at the exchange, but on this other side, business seems to also picking up. And this is what we are going to rely on when we're looking at or projecting the outlook for Africa.
All right, the conversation is getting more interesting, but we need to go on a break now. We'll be right back to discuss more. Stay with us.
Lateef Jakande. Born Lateef Kayode Jakande in the Ekbetedo area of Lagos Island, Lagos State on July 1929. He studied at the Lagos Public School at Enowa, Lagos Island, then at Bonham Memorial Methodist School, Port Harcourt, King's College, enrolled at Ilesha Grammar School, where he edited a literary paper called The Quarterly Mirror. Jakande began a career in journalism in 1949 with the Daily Service and joined the Nigerian Tribune in 1953. The owner, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, appointed Jakande editor-in-chief of the Tribune in 1956. Jakande established John West Publications in 1975 after leaving Tribune and began to publish the Lagos News. He served as the first president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, NPAN. Jakande ran for election as executive governor of Lagos State in 1979 on the Unity Party of Nigeria platform. His administration was effective and open and implemented the cardinal policies of his party. He introduced housing and educational programs targeting the poor, building new neighborhood primary and secondary schools, and providing free primary and secondary education. He gave poor people's children education, and many of them are now very prominent in the society today. Jakande established the Lagos State University and constructed over 30,000 housing units. After the military takeover in 1983, Jakande was charged, prosecuted, and convicted of treason and later pardoned. He served as Minister of Works under the Sani Abacha military regime. He died in Lagos on February 11, 2021. Lateef Jakande was the first civilian governor of Lagos State. Lateef Kayode Jakande, Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
The deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby.
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring Nigerian broadcasting.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, glad to know you're still there with us. We're still looking at the global economic outlook for the year 2024 in respect to the prediction or the forecast made by IMF. And our special guest, our in-house analyst today, is still here with us, Dr. Idahosa Osamans. Glad to know you're still there with us.
My pleasure, Femi, to be with you.
All right. Earlier we were talking about Africa, and we would like to continue in that light. You know, if you look at most African countries, they are battling with serious debt profile. A good reference is that of Kenya now, who obtained a loan from IMF, in which we are trying to reference now about 25 billion Kenya shillings. Now, what do you suggest that should be the narrative for African countries, you know, when it comes to the issue of having their own relevance or independence or their own model, rather than depending on foreign bodies or bodies like IMF when it comes to the issue of revenue?
Well, debt is not something that is peculiar to Africa countries. As we really speak, globally, every nation of the world is indebted. Whether it's Japan, whether it's China, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, every nation in the world is facing debt. So it's not just Africa that is facing debt. That's on the one hand. And I think, for me, really, the projections from the IMF should serve us like an incentive to African leaders. And this is to see how are we going to encourage production in 2024. How will Africa address its food need? Basic necessity. Now, we have to be very deliberate. So it's like somebody saying to you and telling you and say, oh, you have a cancer, or you have blood sugar, diabetes. What that tells you is that it helps you regulate the kind of things you eat so that you can stay alive. And I think this is what the report should do for most African leaders. There are a whole lot of things that we are not doing very well. Just to be honest. The last time we're talking about palliative here, and I did mention, I don't believe in throwing money at problems, which is what African leaders have done over a year to gain cheap political popularity. And that's not the way to go solving our problem. For me, if we have to solve genuinely African problem, there must be targeted and strategic financing of some basic sector. Take, for example, in Nigeria, we're still talking about people not able to afford just rice, which can grow effectively on our land. From Agbede to Ebonyi, to Kebbi, to Niger, we should be able to feed ourselves. in terms of growing rice. Now just imagine the 2 billion that the federal government gave to the states for palliative, the first tranche, were deployed to basic hub, like agriculture, for example, and say, okay, we are sending 2 billion to Niger State for fish farming. And we're going to train and recruit young people from that state, that all we want from you this year is to give us this volume and level of fish. Now this money gets into these people's hand, and they are doing farm, and they are giving us fish. So we wouldn't need to be importing frozen fish or smuggling it across border that takes foreign exchange out. And then you come to Edo State, you give them 2 billion. Rather than use this money to buy a bag of rice, as they are sharing. Because like the Chinese adage says, if you give a man food for one day, you succeed in feeding him one day. But if you train him how to fish, you feed him for the rest of his life. And say, okay, these people in Agbada area, take this 1 billion, buy tractors, get young people employed to farm rice, and say, give us 20 tons of rice in the next 3 months. Their family will be fed, they will earn income, and their life will be better for it. The state will be better for it. Now you have given people rice to eat. They have shared the rice. They have since finished the rice. What next? Nothing. So I think this is where African leaders need to really sit down and think about their social interventions. That rather than throw money away, yes, they say, oh, when you spend this money, you are oiling the economy. No, these are consumption money. It gets in and it does not filter into the economy, because the things that you are buying, actually, the money is not staying within your economy. So that's a problem, because we are import dependent. So what you need to do is that if you give somebody 25,000, it probably go and buy a Turkish suit, and that 25,000 go to Turkey. It doesn't remain in your economy. So we can go to places like Benue, Zamfara, and we're saying all we are doing is cultivation. And then that revamp our textile industry. So all these things government can do. Take money to Aba and ensure that the machinery for production of shoe, quality shoe, because we have a hide skin here that can actually be converted to proper leather. And this can beat what we come from Italy, another part of the world. So if we deliberately, as African leaders, look at those areas around us and invest heavily in this area, it will solve more of our problem than merely throwing money at the problem, which is what we currently do. So I really would say, for us as Africans, let this become like an incentive to help us to plan, so that we have to avoid some certain wastages, like a man who is told that has diabetics had to change his diet to stay alive.
Okay, let's look at Nigeria now. The inflation rates released by the NBS in December put the inflation at 28.92%. And the central bank has different monetary policies that it is using to manage the Nigeria economy. So let's do a comparison between the European Central Bank and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, in a recent interview of the president of the ECB, Christine Lagarde, now she said the projection for the inflation rate in Europe is to bring it to 2.1%. Currently, the projection for 2024 is to bring it from 2.7%, which it was in 2023, to 2. It's to bring it to, it's currently projected to be at 2.7% in 2024, but they are projecting that in 2025, 2026, it should get to 2.1%. Looking at the Central Bank of Nigeria, what should it be doing to bring down the inflation rate of Nigeria using monetary policies?
You see, it will be very difficult for the Central Bank of Nigeria to use monetary policy to control inflation in Nigeria.
Why?
Because, number one, we're a consuming nation, heavily dependent on exports. And because of this overdependence on export, what happened is that most of the things that you consume here, there's this are not produced here, and we have to buy them abroad. So this is what is putting pressure on the foreign exchange. I read yesterday that the Association of Bureau de Change in Abuja said that they are closing shop for a while. Why? Because they said there's scarcity of foreign forests. So now, this tells you that there's a huge pressure. And of course, we expected it because it's January. A lot of children have to pay their children's school fees abroad, and they're in their thousands. And they are relying on this same foreign exchange. So CBN cannot say, parent, bring back your children here. They can't do it. You can't legislate that because people have freedom to train their children wherever they want it. Which is what I say the last time. Now, these people who are sending their children to train abroad are working here in our economy. And they're actually using our money to train and feed other nations. And this is where we need to speak to ourselves as Nigerians. Now, when you get to Europe, they can have that moderate rate of inflation because prices are almost stable. That is what it is. So our inflation is driven by price. Now we're talking about 28%. Now if you look at what has happened between January as school fees came, and then of course this thing jumped up to about 1,500. 1,400 in some places. Now the figure for next month is going to be about at something percent of inflation. Because as the dollar prices is going up, the cost of food, the cost of transportation, as we are still dependent on petrol and everything that is coming from abroad, all these things jumps up as well. And so you measure your inflation at that level. So if we are going to drive down inflation, it's a decision that we have to take as a nation to first and foremost love our country. And how do we love our country? Is by producing the things we eat and eating the things that we produce. It's going to start from there. So if we are thinking that there's one man they are going to bring from Harvard or from MIT who is going to be the governor of CBN, and then he will write paper and it will change the scenario, it can never happen. It will not happen because the CBN has no control. What is responsible for the inflationary trend in Nigeria, they are not within the purview of CBN. People talk about money supply. Where is it you have some excess money in circulation? I was listening to a sister station and somebody said, oh, I predicted that there's too much money in circulation. I don't think there's too much money in our circulation because the money is only in the few hands. And those are not the people that determine what happened in the economy or the growth of our GDP, because most people have no money in their hands within this economy. So what are you saying? Is the money in the economy is even moving around? Money are not moving around. We are still selling naira as we speak. I did POS yesterday for 5,000, you pay 200. That's sales of money. That's our own local money. Because you go to ATM today, you can't see ATM that is disbursing more than 20,000 for you. So where is the excess money in circulation? Where is the money circulating around? So the real issue is not within the CBN. The issue that is generating our inflation is within the economy. And so if those fundamentals are not addressed, and I don't think CBN is the one to address the fundamentals, I don't even think government are the one to address those fundamentals. It is the citizens themselves to realize that if we want a good life, and the only approach to good life is that we become more productive. That if we are going to be relying, as many young people are doing today, on Yahoo plus, or we are going to be relying on kidnapping or banditry, that's the only way to drive our economy, we will just be kidding and joking. So we need to drive hard work as a value for our people. And once we can see this hard work producing effect, then we can manage the inflationary trend in Nigeria.
All right, still talking about the projection for Nigeria, the president has indicated, the desire to increase the GDP, the growth to like $1 trillion economy. As we speak, Nigeria, if you look at the GDP, is the largest in Africa, over $400 billion. What are some of the critical steps you think the president should take in this year? And what are the critical sectors that you think he should beam his searchlight on in order to make this dream a reality?
I think what the president is banking on is actually the solid mineral. They're going to have a lot of investment in that sector to drive that process. And once people can put in money into solid mineral development, because it's so underdeveloped as we speak. So if you get a lot of investment in that sector, and then of course there is a whole lot of ICV, in-country value, in that chain, it's likely to grow the economy to a certain level. So if that happens, we're likely to see growth. But you see, like I said, investors are looking for places where they will put their money and it's going to produce profit at the end of the day, because the whole motivation of anybody going into business is profit making. So there's no point I'm going to put money here and then I cannot make profit. So that's a big problem. So we need to see a lot of investment in our education sector. And I think that's where the focus of government should be. Not just paper qualification kind of education, which we have done over the years. We're looking at functional education. Government need to invest in research and development. That's critical. And we can do that at university levels. And if we don't have lecturers who can do that, we can even advertise globally and ask people to help. Because productivity is driven by the level of education of a people. And once that education quality rises, the productivity level in the country will also rise. And as productivity level is rising, you see profitability and you will see prosperity also rising. So that's the way to go. Now, look at it. President is also growing GDP on the one hand, and they're also talking about contemplating the increase of salary on the other hand, so that civil servants will be able to meet up with the inflationary trend. And I was listening to NSC say today that their proposal for 200,000 minimum wage has been overridden by circumstance. And so they may be projecting 1 million minimum wage. Now, yes, of course, there's nothing NLC cannot talk. See, this is for me a problem. And I don't have problem with people paying minimum wage that's as expensive. But the challenge is that NLC should sit down with government and say, where is this money going to come from? Because if nation is not earning money, or are they expecting government to go and borrow money to pay this thing? These are the conversations that the nation must have. So while they sit down around that table thinking about minimum wage and its increment in Nigeria today, NSA must also be looking at creative ways of generating revenue to be able to fund that wage. And for me, one of the things that government really need to do is to digitize its operations and weed out the very bogus civil service structure. It's too massive. That has to be addressed. Many states may need to take some humble pie. I take, for example, where I come from in Edo State. I have in my local government, I don't have a school that can boast of 3 teachers. Secondary school, I mean, that can boast of 3 teachers. If I were a state government in that area, I harness all the school in one location. and probably buy 3 buses to convert children to come to school. And they save resources and not waste capital. So this is where we have to be looking at and say, how do we save costs? How do we do things so that if we have to pay civil service well, then not with this number. Because there are a whole lot of people who are carrying file up and down that are not necessary, things that can be done by email, where the whole world is talking about sustainability, a paperless economy. Why do we need people carrying file up and down? So remove all those things. Why do we need to employ drivers? They're not necessary anymore. So all these issues is that we see there are new ways. Somebody will ask me, what will these people be doing? We need more people to produce corn. We need more people to produce groundnut. We need more people to produce rice. We need more people to produce yam. We need more people to produce cassava.
Should they be moved to the Ministry of Agriculture?
They don't need to be moved to the Ministry of Agriculture. They have to be empowered by the state to get into private farming and make a living for themselves. That is the way to go. We must tell ourselves honest truth, and we cannot begin to live a lie and are thinking that tomorrow we will come out of our problem. If we continue like this, I tell you, the future is bleak. If we must have to be true to ourselves, we must tell ourselves that the basic thing we need to do as a nation, and this is ensuring that people are productive. That if people are working, there's a reason for them to work. We keep multiplying agencies of government, duplicating and over-duplicating. In short, the last time we were having a training on Fiscal Responsibility Commission, somebody was asking, what's the difference between NFIU and Fiscal Responsibility Commission? Can this actually be managed in one agency? So this is the problem we're having. We keep multiplying agency and using employment like a social scheme. And it should be like that. That's why a lot of people are protesting. Oh, we don't want to move CBN. Oh, remain in Abuja because their children don't want to move. If they don't want to work, they resign. People should be productive. And that is what it should be. We must tell ourselves basic truths and not allow politicians to determine things that are not useful for us, and then at the end of the day, in the next election cycle, we'll be crying and say, oh, we want change. If that change must come, the change has to start from individual, and we must be sincere and realistic about our projections and our planning.
All right, let's look at projections, why they are made, and the ideal follow-up action that they should be complemented with. Now, for the global outlook now, some nations will want to adjust maybe fiscal policies or review their own policies. Now, in Nigeria, there has also been a projection for increase in GDP, and particularly that of the GDP to tax ratio, to debt ratio, and all of that. What should be the corresponding action for Nigeria's projection, even that of the IMF that has been released? What should be the corresponding action of Nigeria, of African countries, and even of the world generally?
You see, for me, it's simple. Listen, what's GDP? It's a summation of a productive activity of a given population in a year. Now, if you have a nation where only very few people are productive, you take the sum of those few nations and divide it by the entire population, so you have your GDP. What should be the strategy of nation is to ensure we have plenty of people who are productive. And then by the time you sum off all these productive activities, and that's why I'm making these recommendations, that number one, where is our strength? I have spoken here on this channel. Nigeria has deficit of about 1.2 million tons of palm oil annually. As we speak, we can't sell corn outside because we don't have enough of it to even feed our chickens and our cows. As we speak, we don't have enough rice to eat. Now, once we put money in all these activities, and all the young people who are able but have nothing to do, and government find creative way to get them into business, then the size of your GDP will expand, because the calculation will be based on the productive activity of each individual at the end of the day. So that, for me, is what should be the strategy.
All right. The wise one has spoken. And so we want to thank you. We feel like going on and on, but we just have to wrap up now. We need to thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts on the issue of economic global outlook and what Africa should do, and most importantly, Nigerian leader. Thank you so much for your submission. I'm passionate about Africa, and I know with determination and with sincerity of purpose, Africa will lead the world. That's great. Proudly African. We are also proud Africans as well. Blessing, what about you? Yes, and we hope that as you had said, more persons should get into production, not just production, because a lot of persons are busy, but it will be in venture that will translate into growth, and a enabling environment for that will be created as well. Thank you very much for being on the show today. My pleasure. Yeah. Let's take a break now and return after this time.
The Three Wise Men. Iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, the statue of three men designed to depict the state's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is no doubt an astounding work of art. Originally built under the administration of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodun Shodende in 1991 and standing over 12 feet high, referred to as Agba Meta or Aro Meta, the three sculptured chiefs were placed along the Lagos-Ibadan toll gate to welcome people coming into Lagos State. The statue called the Three Wise Men by many has become a major signature for the state. Three white-capped chiefs clad in white wrappers, knotted across their shoulders and with clenched right fists are shown in the artwork. The images fascinate and create impressions in the minds of visitors coming into the state, captivating the attention of visitors who look with keen interest, pondering on the messages which the posture of the engraved images signifies. The Three Wise Men has been relocated thrice from its original position at Ojodu Berger end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to Magodo area before its final relocation to its present site at Olowopopo Drive. The sculpture has suffered severe damages over the years and renovated. Bodun Shodende, through this sculpture, depicted the highest honor that can be afforded to anyone in the Eko greeting tradition. The Three Wise Men, Arometa, Souq, Enlightenment.
My name is Dr. Ajili Tobi. My name is Etemere Glover. Naomi, well done, and shout out to Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. I want to encourage everyone to keep watching Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News, and yes, tune into them.
Keep watching Souq News. They are one in town.
Hey, we're watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. Catch them on YouTube and all social media channels.
Hey, my name is Frank Edowo, and I'm imploring you. No, forget that. I am forcing you, coercing you to always stay tuned to Souq News for your news requirements.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Eche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget. We're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, if you're just joining us, you're at the right place, at the right time. We got you covered. Earlier, we talked about the economic outlook for the year 2024, and now we want to beam a searchlight on the aviation industry. The Minister of Aviation in Nigeria, which is Festus Keyamo, is in talk with UK officials about the possibility of having direct flight from Lagos to London. What will be the impact of these on the economy? What are the underlying issues, and what are the critical issues or steps that should be taken to make this a reality? To shed more light on this, we are being joined also by our in-house analyst. We have Sam Oruje with us. Glad to know you're still there with us.
Good morning, Femi.
Great.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes.
And good morning, Blessing. A pleasure to be here.
And it's a new month, so happy new month.
Thank you.
All right, let's look at the planned collaboration between the government of Nigeria and the UK government in having an airline, and the one that will have a direct flight to the UK. Do you see this as some worthy collaboration? Is it going to make any difference in terms of foreign flights?
I'm yet to really have the full details of these proposals, but if we can speak to it on the surface value. This kind of collaboration, is it between the British Airways and the Nigerian government, or they are floating a new airline that will fly from Nigeria to the UK? These are the core issues that we need to really resolve.
So the arrangement is to have, it's being made with Airpeace, so the arrangement is to have a kind of formal arrangement where it's easier for flights or local flights or Nigerian airlines to fly directly from Lagos, to London. Now, you've seen the bottleneck associated with this in terms of protocol, the international protocol, in terms of the expenses involved and all that. But don't you think if this becomes a reality, it makes it easier for Nigerians who want to, go this route?
I recall last year, the vice president of the airline operators of Nigeria, who is incidentally the chief executive of Airpeace, he was complaining about international conspiracy against local operators in flying some of the popular destinations, particularly the UK. So if the federal government is doing government-to-government negotiation to have Airpeace fly that route, that's a welcome development. But if you look at the issues with international airline conspiracy, according to the vice president of airline operator, Alan Oyema, incidentally the chief executive, then if this collaboration is properly well done, and the rate at which British Airways flying to Lagos and Abuja, and if Airpeace, so that conference that was held last year by the airline operators of Nigeria, some of the core issues that they discussed in that conference was the issue of aviation financing, whereas people from other climes have a single-digit borrowing to acquire aircraft. They spend between 26 to 28% in terms of loan. So that will impact in terms of find a way to do some concessioning in terms of how they can get some single-digit loan, which I think is impossible, particularly when you look at it from the perspective of the cost of funds that is available to the financial service sector in Nigeria. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, from other foreign operators, it's expensive to lease aircraft here. So these are core issues. So that will not, in my view, affect the cost changing to Naira under the current dispensation. You know what that will come. So, but if we look at it from the principles of purchasing, I think to concern themselves with is to what extent will this movement impact on the operational efficiency of FAN.
The argument on the part of the minister is, the body needs to be closer to the agencies it regulates. If, for instance, the bulk of aviation activities is in Lagos, then that should necessitate the relocation of that headquarters to Lagos. Don't you think, like you said, the issue of operation, it will bring efficiency to the issue of regulation and then the issue of operation for the regulatory authority?
I think that was the point that I underscored earlier. I'm avoiding using words that are a bit political. So I look at it from the press statement that was made by the ministry in line with their core operations, and they are saying that there's a need to bring the core staff to where the core operation of that sector is. And I don't think there's anything really bad about that. But we're in a country where politics override every other interest. And I try to avoid making political statement. But from the purview of the minister, I think it's just to enhance the operational efficiency, which we positively impact on their deliverable as an agency of government, in my view.
All right, there's a recent development in the aviation industry. Prior to this time, some of the airlines have been unable to repatriate funds back to their parent company, but in a recent development, the CBN has been able to pay those airlines that have been cleared what was owed them. But the IATA CBN needs to do more because there's still an outstanding of $700 million. But some of the airlines have come up to commend the CBN. What's your take about this development?
I think it's a welcome development, and for the fact that the backlog has been cleared to a certain level shows that there's a will to find a way to resolve those issues. I think the CBN in their statement has equally mentioned the fact that there's a scarcity of the dollar and that they have made a repayment plan, a schedule that they will use to resolve that issue. And I think those operators should be patient to some extent to see how that trajectory is completed by the central bank initiative to resolve the outstanding differences between the operators, particularly the international operators.
Now let's look at the hike in the cost of flight tickets, which has been occasioned by the exchange rate and the fact that the cost of Jet A1, which is very critical to the operations of these airlines. What can be done, in the interim or in the long time to also help the plight of these the stakeholders, and also to help reduce the hike that you have in flight tickets in Nigeria?
Earlier in our conversation, I underscored some of the challenges of the air transport sector in Nigeria. One is aviation financing. Two, the foreign exchange rate, the cost of leasing, and jet fuel that you just mentioned will impact on the operation of the airline. So they cannot operate in isolation. Where the operating environment is harsh, there's nothing they can do, rather to operate within the purview of how their operation is impacted negatively by the various factors that we enumerated earlier. So that's, if the government can find a way to reduce aviation financing to single digits, like what it is in other climes. If the refineries are working, then the cost of buying those fuel will be reduced minimally. The cost of leasing is external, so I don't think we have much control over that. So, but if you look at the combination of these factors that we just talked about, then the cost of flying will be relatively high for some period of time. If all the other factors are considered and government find a way to strike a balance, then the operators may have a reason to reduce the cost of flying.
All right, let's look again at the repatriation of funds. Now, having about $700 million remaining in Nigerian banks because of the scarcity of forex, is this a disincentive to foreign investment in the aviation sector?
I don't think so. If you look at the Nigerian destination as an aviation hub, particularly even between Nigeria and the UK and the US, is very beneficial. It's one of their very lucrative routes. So I'm not too sure if the 700 million will affect their relationship, because it's a very lucrative hub. But then the repayment plan has been put in place by the Central Bank of Nigeria to find a way to see how this money can be settled over a period of time. But I'm not speaking for the CBN. Since there's a schedule for repayment, I'm sure that 700 million will be settled in due course. And I don't think it will negatively impact on the Nigerian destination, because it's a very lucrative destination.
Now, let's look at the conduct of some of the officials you have at the airport. You know, the airport is like a gateway to the nation. You know, the first point of contact for anyone visiting the nation. That's the first point of call. Now, how will you assess the conduct of, airport officials in Nigeria compared to other climes? And then you look at also the state of infrastructure and then the level of professionalism. What's your take on this, and what do you expect the Minister of Aviation to do in this regard? Now that regulatory authority has been relocated to Lagos, what should be the narrative in making this better than the way it used to be?
Personally, my last interaction with the international airport shows that there's a remarkable improvement, particularly on the new terminal. There's a high degree of sanity within the new terminal. I think some of those unprofessional gatekeepers within the airport has been reduced drastically. But then the ministry and the minister can still work to improve on the number of the unprofessional gatekeepers that you have within the airport. And like you mentioned, the airport is one of the first contact point. It shows to what extent that the internal mechanism of a country is seen as you are flying into those countries. But by and large, there's an improvement, but then it takes a while to clean an old system that has been messed up, permit my use of word. I think within the next years, those improvements will be okay. But then the ministry, in line with this reform, must equally find a way to reskill some of those aviation sector staff that have lost their job within that sector, so that they don't find their way and become some form of nuisance in the airport. So they need to reskill them so that they can be useful in another sector, so that they don't find a way to get into those environments where they are not really needed.
All right, let's take you back to the relocation of FAN headquarters. Now, what impact will it have in terms of efficiency?
No, if people are close to their areas of operation, I think that will impact on their operation. But then, more often than not, we have an issue of politics in the way we address our issues. So the politics of the relocation is beclouding the benefits of that relocation. And that relocation was just done about 6 years ago under the Buhari administration. They were here in Lagos, and they had to move them to Abuja. I don't think, even if you have the core ministry in Abuja, the operational headquarters of FAN, if it's in Lagos, I don't think there's any much issues about that. But let's see how we can remove politics from the way we run businesses in Nigeria.
All right, let's take a break and return to look at some more issues as it concerns the aviation industry in Nigeria. Don't go anywhere.
My name is Dr. Rafiu Oladipo.
My name is Baba Jalal Repega.
I'm Reverend Juliet Benite.
I'm Godio Didi.
My name is Professor Oladokun Sulaiman Olarawaju.
Souq News is on the ground, loading.
Very enlightening, very educative, and entertaining.
Thank you to Souq News.
So I'm happy that Souq TV has come into existence.
I'm happy to be here in the Souq News.
I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel and keep watching news that makes sense.
As Browning said, one's extension of one's reach should not exceed one's grasp, or what is heaven for. And I think Souq News is doing that.
Africa needs a voice of truth, and Souq News has become one of them. And get ready, get ready, get ready.
And keep watching.
Keep watching Souq News.
Keep watching Souq News. It's a place to be.
Keep watching Souq News.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Marse Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
Still a deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the...
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, indeed. We have to shape policy and advance development with that conversation. You know, you just discovered I like saying that. It's just to let you understand the narrative so that you understand the essence of our conversation. We've been looking at the happenings in the aviation industry, and we still have an in-house analyst with us. We still have Sam with us in the studio.
Thank you.
All right. The issue of flight delays and cancellations have been of great concerns, even to the minister. And the minister has said, starting from next week, the names of airlines, the hairy ones who are engaged in the issue of cancelling of flights or delay of flights, will be published, for, they call it name and shame. That's the exercise, to name and shame them so that this trend will stop. What do you make of this development and the fact that in this climate, when flights are being cancelled, there seems not to be compensation?
First, I'd like to look at it from two perspectives. One, from the part of the regulatory authority, then on the other hand, on the part of the operators. One, there are critical issues when you talk about surveillance equipment within the airport. To what extent are these very functional to the flying aircrafts? So the ministry, on the other hand, must put a house in order for to be able to wield the big stick. Then two, more often than not, the flying public in Nigeria do not often know how to place a demand in terms of service failure. So, and there are critical elements within the arrangement for the flying public. So I think the best way beyond naming and shaming is for people to be able to place a demand on those operators where they are not able to meet the time for flying. But like I mentioned earlier, what of the technical end of the aircraft to be able to move from one point to the other? And this has to do with the regulatory agency. So if the navigational aids and every other equipment are in order, the weather condition, nobody has control over that. So these are some of the critical factors that we need to look at. So it's not just sufficient to name and shame. The regulator itself must find a way to put our house in order. Then individuals within the flying public should be able to test those relationships by placing a demand on the airline when they fail to fly at the appropriate time. Maybe when there's a legal pronouncement and some claims are made on those airlines, in the future, I think they will sit up. That's my personal view.
All right, what's your view on state-owning airlines in Nigeria? The Lagos State government is proposing establishing an airline and also building an airport at the Lekki area. According to the Lagos State government, Governor Sanwo-Olu, he says that the financing model for this had been on the way for several months.
Okay, that's the Lagos State government initiative in terms of trying to float an airline and build an airport. We don't really have the details, but then from an economic point of view, Lagos has the financial capacity to do a PPP arrangement in that sector without making some definitive statement. I'm sure in the long run that will be a PPP arrangement between the Lagos State government and maybe some private sector initiative. On the other hand, building an airport, particularly in the Lekki free zone area, we improve on the additional hub within Lagos. And that, if you look at that hub or destination where you have the Dangote refinery, you have the Lekki deep sea port, that will help to improve on the business within that area. But it will be too early in the day to make a final decision because even the Fourth Mainland Bridge they mentioned about 2 years ago is still in the work. So let's see that this come quickly into fruition. And I think it will be part on the business axis of the Lekki area.
Now, this conversation won't be complete if you don't make reference to the issue of national carrier, because we are reviewing some of the critical steps being taken by this ministry in recent times. You're aware of what, the step being taken by the minister to scrap that deal, which was becoming a national embarrassment. What do you make of his decision to scrap, even though some still argue that there's a need for national carrier, there's a need to have something that resonates with Nigerians, that could sound like a PR for Nigeria? And if you look at the way this thing has been handled in the past, what are the lessons for Nigeria? Do we still need to go back to this route? There's
a two-side to this debate. The There are those who believe that we have a need for a national carrier, for national prestige, for national reputation management. That's on the one side. Then on the other hand, the way we have managed that sector in the past, what happened to the Nigerian Airways, what were the lessons that we learned from the failure of that airline, for their inability to pay insurance cover, their inability to meet financial obligations to their foreign counterparts. So these are the core issues that we need to look at. So do we really have a need for national pride in terms of the aviation sector? The argument is neither here nor there. But then the minister equally was in Hungary, if I'm correct, recently on a visit in continuation with what the previous minister did in a way to try to get some concession to bring some smaller aircraft into the Nigerian airspace. But then personally, I don't really believe the way we put politics and sentiment to managing government enterprise in Nigeria. For the politics of it is not something that will be desirable in the long run.
Okay, now having a state carrier, is it going to bring any impact, any positive impact into the aviation industry in terms of competition? And how do you think it will impact the flying population?
What the Lagos State government may have done is feasibility studies on the viability of floating an airline beyond the issue of prestige. I'm sure they have their figures. They have their figures right, and their projections are okay. Why not? So it's a business. So if the government, in their own wisdom, feel that there's a need for them to compete with other domestic operators, then so be it, in my view. Then on the other hand, if you look at the new development on the Lekki corridor, business corridor, then there's a need that the Lagos State government may benefit from building an airport and floating an airline. But then we don't have the details because we're not in government, but at least with the sketchy information that is in the public domain, I'm sure they will have done their feasibility and viability plan. And if they feel that their figures are right, why not?
Is it all about competition? Because you've seen a lot of state-owned airports that are likely being abandoned, because of the human traffic, the level of patronage is so low. And so what should be the ideal when it comes to siting airports or making this kind of provision for it? Taking example from that of Lagos, what should be the example for other states? Because it's looking more like a political agenda. Okay, we must just do this, one of the capital projects for that administration, and it's discovered it's been done and then largely abandoned. Look at the one in Ibadan, look at the one in Ekiti, which is not yet in full force, and then you've discovered that money has been allocated for this kind of projects. What should be the ideal? What should inform siting airports? And what should be the responsibility of the regulatory agencies to ensure that these airports are up to standard, and then the volume of businesses going on around the states would demand this kind of service?
I think the airport is on the concurrent list. So to that extent, within the framework of ability for state and federal government to build airport, that has been established. But then when you look at the economics of siting those airports, to a very large extent, many of them were more political, grandiose projects by governments to siphon some fund away to their crony. But if you look at it from the perspective of the Lagos State government, without having the details, I can see some elements of economic viability for siting the airport, particularly in the Lekki business corridor. The business potential in that area is very huge. To that extent, I think the one being pushed by the Lagos State government may just be different from some other ones. On the other hand, the Akwa Ibom government is in that terrain. The Imbo Air is doing very well in terms of their operation. They have even gone international. They fly to Accra, Ghana twice in a week since last year, either August or October last year. So, depending on those who run those businesses. The cargo airport, to a very large extent, I don't want to stand political, has not bring the desired result. Cargo, to bring what from Ekiti? Those are the core issues.
All right, now for states that want to have their own airports, now as you've already established, the economies of the airport should be considered as well. If the state has the resources to build a new airport, and we're talking about upgrading infrastructure at the already existing airports, should a partnership be formed between the states and the federal government in upgrading infrastructures instead of just multiplying the airports?
No, I don't think a partnership would be sustainable. Most of the states are struggling. So
for states that have the capacity to build new airports, instead of a new airport, upgrading the existing one, which looks like a more viable plan?
I think that's a business decision by the state government, so we cannot really speak to that. So if states feel that they have the resources and they want to build their airport and the federal government cannot manage what they have built, then I think in terms of comparative advantage and from competitiveness perspective, then maybe those states, if they are able to build better airports and they have better facilities and good customer service, then the federal government airports in some of those states will struggle, and that might bring a better room for competition, or maybe to improve on those facilities where people are not patronizing those airports.
All right, it's time for us to go on another break. It's getting more interesting, and when we return, it will get bigger. Stay with us.
Idumota Market. Eko Idumota, once a residential neighborhood, is home to Idumota Market located on Lagos Island. It is one of the oldest and arguably one of the largest markets in West Africa. Idumota is a historic neighborhood adjacent to the Lagos port that facilitated the slave trade, and later under the British indirect rule, it surrounded to exports that fueled the colonial enterprise. Idumota was also the location of an armed forces remembrance cenotaph called Soja Idumota, built as a monument to Nigerian soldiers who served with the West African Frontier Force. An Eyo Masquerade statue and a clock tower are also some monuments at Idumota. Idumota Market is so popular that large sales are recorded as early as 7 a.m. The market is made up of hundreds of locked-up shops occupying several multi-story buildings, with some measuring about 5 or more floors. In 2010, the Lagos State government demolished some illegal structures in order to improve vehicular and human movement in and around the markets. During weekdays, the neighborhood of Idumota is densely populated by shoppers, traders, and bus passengers. From the Carter Bridge ascending into Lagos Island, passengers can see the neighborhood before disembarking at their final destination. Idumota Market accommodates the substantial inflow of imported goods. The bulk of import from abroad are routed first through Idumota and then on to other markets through Nigeria and other West and Central African countries. The energy of private Idumota traders and wholesalers facilitate this activity, where millions of US dollars worth of wholesale is exchanged daily. Idumota Market, Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruboje, and Idahosa Osamas.
Still a deficit budget. We're still going to borrow as much as up to 7 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby. So the first thing that is done is for the
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring back Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation.
This is early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Yes, it's still your favorite program, and then we're still looking at some of the critical steps being taken by the Ministry of Aviation in recent times. That is Festus Keyamo, and our in-house analyst, Sam, is still here with us. Now, let's look at, we've been talking about the ministry, the actions of the minister. Now, what should be the role of the flying public, you know, in making the aviation industry better than the way it is? The flying public, do we have roles to play, you know, especially when it comes to complementing the effort being made by the minister or the ministry to ensure that the industry is better than the way it is?
Simply put, I think the flying public has a critical role to play in that sector. Number one, they should be able to place demand on their customer service. Where there are customer service failure, they should be able to find a way to get redress. That will help to shape up that industry, in my view.
Well, you at least see that perhaps maybe because people are just in a hurry or they feel it's not significant. Would you want to see that being put into test, and then with the plan being made by the minister now to start naming and shaming and even publishing the names of some of the airlines who are going to be defaulting? Do you think this will also embolden people and the flying public to start taking to their rights, and maybe you start seeing court cases as we go by?
I think so, but I think there should be more of advocacy in that sector. There are civil society organizations that work in that sector, so they can scale up the advocacy and find a way to see how they can, as a collective, find a way when there are infractions. The Consumer Protection Council or agency should equally wake up to their responsibility by finding a way to see how those who are not able to meet with their service failure responsibility, then those agencies can equally with the big stick against some of those operators. So it's a two-way traffic, in my view. The ministry should be up and doing. The society should place more demand, should demand more accountability in terms of service delivery.
Talking about traffic, what is the way to build traffic for the aviation sector, for airlines particularly now, since the hike in the cost of airfares, it has dropped? Is there a way around it? We understand that Jet A1 fuel is expensive, but is there some help that could come to that?
Is it in terms of government support or in terms of the operation?
In terms of the airfare, to attract more traffic, because some persons would have loved to use flights now have turned to other means of transportation because it's expensive.
Yeah, if the information that I have in the public domain is correct, the recent visit by the Minister of Aviation to Hungary is to find a way to create a PPP arrangement where you have small aircraft that are cheaper to fly. So if that works out, there are, for the purpose of a marketing campaign, I'm not able to mention some other smaller operators within the industry. So if we have smaller aircraft, the pricing regime for those smaller aircraft will help to improve on the number of people that can fly across various destinations within the geographic boundary of Nigeria. But then, the cost of aviation fuel, the cost of maintenance, and even the taxes being paid by the airline operators, they're on the high side. So, the government and the operators sit around the table to see how we can improve on their operational efficiency and how they can even stay afloat. The airline business is not very profitable business across the world. So that's why you need a lot of support from the government so that people can take advantage of flying. But as long as we don't have many small aircraft within the airspace in Nigeria, that will become a major challenge in terms of the number of people that can fly at a reasonable price.
All right, thank you very much, Sam Maruju, for being on the show today. It's been wonderful having you here.
My pleasure.
And thank you for being a part of Early Exchange today. It continues tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. Do ensure to stay with Souq News for the rest of the amazing programs that we have for you today. Market Insight comes up at 11 a.m. There'll be sports later in the afternoon, and then there'll be Souq Pulse by 4 p.m. I am Blessing Aiche. It's a new month. Happy new month to you. Make the most of February. Enjoy your day.
And do also remember that you can do a catch-up of our